Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar series. Today, we are going to be looking at workplace safety. It isn't optional. And are you ready? Um, Before we get started, if you would please let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. I am Kim Jackson, and I'm with IFMA, joining you from a suburb of Houston, Texas. Hopefully, everybody is doing well. We're very excited about this particular panel that we have put together for you today. They will be sharing best practices to creating workplace safety. This includes mining incidents for lessons, aligning executives, and practicing the plan. And what I really like that they're going to be sharing is practice the plan so that your first response is the right response. It is my pleasure to introduce Haniel Lin. He is Castle CEO and will be helping to introduce this great panel. Haniel, all to you.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to IFMA for bringing this community together. Today, I'm right outside of Denver. Actually, normally our offices are outside of Washington, D.C., but I'm not at home today. But again, my name is Haniel, and I'm CEO of Castle. And for those of you who may not know us, Castle spent more than 50 years focused exclusively on the commercial real estate security business or industry, partnering with office, multifamily, institutional, mixed-use portfolios really across the country and somewhat internationally as well. We find ourselves operating at the intersection of technology, monitoring, operational response, and oftentimes work closely with facility leaders who you all sit at the center of risk management and security. And as we've tracked this over the 50 years that we've been in business, we know that security has evolved very much from being a specialized function to becoming a core component in facility strategy. So deeply connected to operational continuity, occupational safety or occupant safety, executive protection, organizational reputation, experience, all of that wrapped very much into this function. And facility managers are often then the connective tissue between operations, security, IT, HR, vendors, executive leadership, lots of different constituents and groups. And when something needs to be prevented, or unfortunately, when some things go wrong, the FM organization is then at the center of coordination. And that's why we wanted to bring together this conversation today with practitioners who bring experience from corporate environments, professional service firms, high security facilities, and crisis response leadership. And so with that, I'd love to introduce our lovely, wonderful panel today. Let me start at the top. Lindsay Staples, a Director of Administration at McDermott, Will & Schulte, supporting a global law firm with more than 1,400 lawyers across 20 plus offices. Hi, Lindsay. Next, we have Stephen Meinke, the Director of Security at Nestle USA, responsible for securing over 80 offices, manufacturing distribution facilities nationwide. Hey, Steve.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we don't have you? Can you hear us or no? No. Okay, so we're gonna work on that, hopefully. Okay. Next, we have Dan Linsky. So Dan is the Managing Director at Kroll Enterprise Security Risk Management and former Superintendent-in-Chief of the Boston Police Department, where he led crisis response during the Boston Marathon bombing. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Good morning. Good afternoon, I guess, depending where you are.
Good morning, good afternoon. Great to have you. Thank you. And then finally, we have Rob Brennan, who is CTO of I2G Systems. And I2G is part of our Castle family, specializes in high security environments, including data centers, healthcare facilities, and large scale venues. Rob, how are you? Nice to have you.
Good. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, thank you for all of you, to all of you for being here with us. And hopefully we'll get Steve back on with us reasonably soon. So the way that we frame this up is that I've got a set of questions for our panelists where hopefully we'll get a bunch of different ideas surfaced. And then we'll also try to keep some time at the end for questions from the audience, if we can do that. Okay, so let's get into it and start off. So I think the way that we thought about setting the stage is to just start out with a pretty foundational question. Just what is, from a facilities management standpoint, what does good security actually look like? And maybe I'm gonna go to you first, Lindsay. So you've got a distributed environment of a bunch of different offices and a bunch of different buildings. How do you think about that? You've got protocols, staffing models, structures. What does a good security posture look like to you? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it, it's really, it's multi-pronged for our organization and probably for most of your organizations as well. Obviously, we've got protocols, systems, policies, all of those things in place, but how it really plays out on a daily basis is our buildings are pretty much all high-rise buildings in large cities. And so our first point of defense, if you will, is the building security. So when we're looking at moving into a building, we're looking at, do they have controls of the exterior of the building, turnstiles, elevator, all of those aspects of building security. So that's really our first line of defense. And I would say our second line of defense is where we've partnered with Castle. We have obviously scanning readers, cameras, all of those typical types of devices at all of our ingress points that we rely on to monitor who's coming into our space and ensure that only people who have proper credentials are allowed into our space. But I would say our most important line of defense is our people and the training that we have done for our people. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, this training has paid off for us in real life, where we've had potential instances of a threat, and our training of our people has really paid off for us in being able to thwart any sort of exposure. And so I cannot overstate enough that having a culture of security is everybody's responsibility is in my opinion, the number one most important thing that you can do from a security standpoint.
Yeah, great. I think we'll come back and explore all those themes in a little bit, from the perimeter with the building to how you think about technology to ultimately how you think about training and culture. So thank you. That's a fantastic kickoff. Dan, let me turn to you. So you spent a lot of time with a range of different clients, and from an advisory standpoint, how are you spending your time with your clients? Where are you focusing your conversation? And then are there places where teams may be underestimating their vulnerabilities today?
Yeah, if you look at budgets for companies, they spend huge amounts for cybersecurity and think, okay, we're going to be safe for our cyber event. But I have broken into Fortune 500 companies across the globe, not with a crowbar and a ski mask, but with social engineering, a handful of coffee, and a hello. And I'm walking into areas where if you don't have that training and the culture that Lindsay talked about, I'm allowed to go all kinds of places. People are polite and kind and don't want to say anything, especially in large organizations where they don't know everyone. And I can use that. I was a cop for a number of years and had a top secret clearance. My information was vetted by the FBI and the Personnel Administration down in Washington, D.C. All of that information, if people had clearances in the U.S. government, was stolen by the Chinese government by somebody going into the facility and putting a thumb drive into the HVAC system and downloading all of that information. So while they had amazing cybersecurity, they had a cleaning crew with no background checks and no physical security, and they essentially went around millions of dollars of cybersecurity to protect it. So physical security is intimately related to cybersecurity, and people underestimate and say it's never going to happen here. And unfortunately, oftentimes we're getting a call after someone's had that bad day, and we scramble to try and help them mitigate that. But preferably, we work with firms like MWE to get ahead of that bad day and prevent it from happening.
And just curious, when you have these conversations, are they surprised by that is a exposure vulnerability, or like, oh yeah, we just hadn't planned around it, or how do they react?
They're shocked. And when we do our trainings, we usually come in the day before and do an assessment of the physical security, the base building security. And oftentimes we're able to defeat that because they're paying for, somebody to sit in a chair and they're paying the lowest rate and they're just checking a box, right? That's why the facility management has to be in line with the tenants' thoughts and desires, and they've got to work jointly to develop the security program they want. And oftentimes we will go into the facilities ahead of time before we do the training, and part of our presentation is, hey, should we have been able to do this, that, and the other thing in your office? And people look like with their jaws drop. However, sometimes you run into folks who follow the rules and just hold you accountable, and they don't care how good your line of BS is. They actually go through the process. And those are the strongest points of any security program. It's the people, much like Lindsay said. It's not just technology, but people coupled with technology can keep your environment as safe and secure as possible.
Fantastic. Well, we'll come back and explore some of that as well in a little bit. Thank you. Let's turn to Rob. Rob, so you do a lot of work also with a range of clients. So from your chair and an integrator's view, what do you see as the gaps between what organizations think that they have in place and what do they actually have, and what parts are ineffective or effective?
Well, Dan, actually, it's a great softball to catch. It's not rarely a technology problem. It's a complete process integration and turns into a people problem. One of the largest frustrations I have as an integrator is, there's a passion to keep people safe. There's a passion to do the right thing, but people get so focused on a project versus an outcome, and more importantly, the operating model of it. And so I get engaged like, hey, I want you to install this, or I want you to install this particular item. We go in there and install it, but is it fully integrated into your policies and procedures? Are you trained up on it? Are you still using it? And everything becomes siloed. What we try to get people to understand is you have to look at a very holistic approach. It's echoing what Lindsay said. It's not just a silo of technology here or a person doing this. It's a whole ecosystem of things working together. One of the bylines we like to say is you have to align your technology program with your procedures and policies. If those aren't in alignment, it doesn't matter what whiz-bang technology you buy, it's not part of the operating whole. And that's where we find the largest gap is that you go, I have a checkbox of access control, video, intercoms, policies, background checks, and all this, but if you're not trained to use them correctly, if they're not maintained as a whole, if they're not actually implementing the policies or the procedures you're training on, you don't have the security you think you have.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, well, the themes are pretty consistent, right? You have various lines of defense, and at the end of the day, it's not just the technology that you put together; it's the technology, the coordination with a broader ecosystem that you work in, and then the most important part of that ecosystem are all the people inside of it, and then how do you coordinate all of that together into one consistent format? So you're designing it with full intention to be a secure system. So that's a fantastic setup, I think, to the rest of the conversation that we're going to have. So we all appreciate this, I think, is that the threat environment continues to evolve, right? So we see targeted violence, and all of us were probably pretty close to what happened last year at 345 Park in New York, or even before that in, I guess it was 2024 with the United Healthcare incident. You hear and see executive threats. You've got protest activity all over the place, insider risk, vulnerabilities, and all of that is connected again into this ecosystem that we were just talking about. And so there's so many risks that are afoot now. And to the group, what I'd be interested to hear more about is, as you see through your lens, what are some of the changes over, especially the last 12 to 18 years, that our facility leaders really need to be paying close attention to? And so, Dan, I'm going to go to you first, if I can, just to kick us off. How should everybody be thinking about risk differently than 5 years ago, let's say?
It should be a professional development program where you're looking at what's going on. And some of that is reading the newspaper and watching the news channels and seeing the types of threats that are occurring and making sure, having conversations, what would we do if an active assailant showed up at our front door now? And then having a policy and a procedure and a training that is not just a book on a shelf. It's actually what people understand and do, and it's been trained and tested. I was the chief of the Boston Marathon when the Boston Marathon bombing attack occurred. I can tell you it was because we trained and prepared for active assailant, multiple casualty incidents with bombs and explosives and bullets going off. We were able to save lives that day. And we were able to go back to our training beforehand because we had trained it and responded it. And our teams went to their file cabinet that was in front. If you do have a crisis at your facility, people are going to freeze. And it's about getting out of that freeze mode. And actually part of the training we do is training people to get out of that freeze mode, to take a deep breath and go to their training and their plan and put it in play. So making sure it's not just a procedure, it's not a check a box thing, but we're actually developing it and having conversations. Different things have occurred, and you have to say, okay, what would I do if that occurred in my facility? What would we do if our people were in harm's way that way? Whether it's an active assailant threat, whether it's chemical or biological or natural occurrence that happens, there's a flood, there's a electrical strike. You have to kind of be prepared for having that bad day and think about it ahead of time, because day of is too late to do so. So making sure people are broadcasting, are forecasting the types of things that come their way, and at least having conversations and making sure that their plans are geared towards that response should it become necessary.
Yeah. Response is everything, certainly what you just said, and making sure that people understand and appreciate the threat, and then understand how the response really matters. I'm curious if you, through the lens of the conversations that you've had with your clients, certainly there are more threats, all the ones I rattled off in the beginning. Do you see any particular ones that people need to be paying more attention to these days, or ones that they may have been less aware of a little bit ago?
Obviously, you know, the world of violence towards executives has changed since, December of 2025, right? Companies need to be looking out online to see what their program is, who's talking in a negative fashion. Are there threats? Are those threats something they have to be concerned with, or is it somebody in a bot farm in Russia that really is just churning out content? But if it is a threat and it's a disgruntled employee, and I geolocate his photograph on his Twitter page and he's 2 blocks from the office, that's a legitimate threat. And we've got to make sure we're on that beforehand, so that base building security can know about it, our team can know about it, our executives can know about it. And if we need to, we engage law enforcement and our other agencies to try and take action ahead of time. So that physical threat is there, whether it's a disgruntled employee, disgruntled customer, client, or a domestic violence issue. Somebody who has had a relationship with somebody and it's gone off the rails. They want to engage in violence. They've got a restraining order. They don't know where they're staying, but they know 8 hours a day they're at the headquarters at Castle, working from 9 to 5 on the 14th floor, and that's where they choose to target them. So being aware of those types of things. The other thing is informing people about it. We have all these access control systems we put in place. A lot of people don't realize why they're there, and don't realize that if you pull the fire alarm, they're all going to fail, and don't realize that if I swipe and it says red, well, even though I'm a good guy and I was there all last week and things were well, there may be a reason that they've cut off my access, and either I've got a broken card or I've got a problem and I'm trying to get inside to seek harm and revenge. And giving people that knowledge creates the culture, just like MWE did, where people are armed with knowledge and understand it's security is part of their job and responsibility, not just a button they call when they need help.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, certainly the what you started out with, the bad actors are out there. The technology that enables them to do bad things has gotten worse. We probably are in a better position to detect what's happening now than we have been because of technology. But at the end of the day, ultimately making sure that our teams understand what's going on and have the knowledge and appreciation so that they know how to respond. Very good. Thank you. So Lindsay, you and I've spent a bunch of time talking about how your security policies have changed, maybe more recent time, especially conversations that you're having with your executive team. How do you reflect on the threats and what's changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, a couple of things on that. And for anybody who's confused why Dan keeps referencing MWE, we were McDermott, Will, and Emery until the beginning of this year. We went through a merger, so it's now MWS. But so anybody who's questioning what Dan's referring to, it's me at McDermott. So a couple of things on that front. In terms of the executive safety, we host a lot of events with very high profile people in, healthcare, technology, other industries. And so we've had a lot more conversations around safety and security for our events, and really making sure that we've got some locked down protocols. We've brought in actual security, law enforcement, Kroll team, et cetera, for helping those high profile people feel a little bit more safe and secure in attending our events, whether they're on site at a McDermott office or, on the beach in South Miami, where we've hosted events before. So that's one aspect of it for sure. But another aspect, and I think we've all alluded to this a little bit, is the evolving AI technology and the threat that can pose for being able to potentially infiltrate an office. And I'll just share at a really, really high level an instance where a very obvious phishing email was sent to someone. That person got a phone call from somebody who purported to be on our IT team and said, "Hey, you just got a phishing email. We're going to send somebody to your office to check out your computer because something seems to be wrong with it." They then, that supposed IT person asked to have somebody added to our base building security, at which point our highly trained team said, something doesn't seem right here. These names aren't checking out with our internal intranet. Scarily enough, the person actually showed up at our building and said that they were there to meet with this partner. And thankfully, our person who had been so well trained hadn't just added them to the security list and said, no, they actually can't come into our space. And they were escorted out of the building. But this was, this was a multi-pronged approach that these individuals took to try to gain access to our space by sending a phishing email. Obviously, most of our personnel are on LinkedIn or other ways to be able to see who our personnel are. And so they're impersonating people. And so I think this is where I come back to the training culture of our people are our first line of defense. And if this receptionist individual had just done what they were told by our IT person and put this person on security, we would have been calling Dan saying, we've had that really bad day. Come help us. And gratefully, we didn't have to make that phone call because of the groundwork that we've been laying over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's great. Preparedness matters a lot in that. I'm curious, just as you think about your executive team, or as you have talked to your peers and others in industry, do you think that the nature of the executive conversations have changed about recognizing these issues or appreciating that these are enormous exposures inside the workforce today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, kind of not to beat the AI horse to death, but a lot of conversations around, particularly on the financial side, where AI can look like somebody impersonating somebody else's email and saying, hey, I'm the landlord at this building. We are banking with a new bank. These are our new routing instructions. And we had an instance where they actually were modeling the actual email address. So it wasn't even like you would hover over it and it would be like a terrible @Gmail. It was like they had somehow, I don't know how, but they had somehow actually like modeled this person's actual email address.
Right.
And again, gratefully, the training of our people, and we have protocols in place to say, it needs to be a multi-factored authentication. It's a certified letter, it's a phone call, but a phone call, that can be faked as well. So those are the types of conversations that we're having. I think it's easy to fake a voice. You can fake a video, all of these things, because we're all on LinkedIn. We've all got, YouTube sessions of our voice and the video of how we move and how we talk. And it doesn't take much to be able to create something to impersonate that. And so really our executive conversations are revolving around what that can look like, how that technology is evolving, and the systems, protocols, procedures that we need to put in place to make sure that we've got multiple kind of checkpoints, authentication points.
Yeah, that's a great bridge to Rob. But the scary thing these days, we're probably just the four of us now are adding to the fodder of people who now can copy us and mimic us and out there in AI land. So Rob, you spend a lot of time in technology, obviously. How do you see what is changing these days by the things that are enabled by technology to do bad things with for our bad actors, but also ways for us to maybe address some of these issues on the back end of it and solve it before they become problems? How do you see that affecting us or changing over time?
Technology is the classic two-edged sword. It can be used to protect us, but it also can be used to attack us. And that's really, you're finding it, like technology, just like it's advancing on the AI side, the credential technology has changed dramatically. Yet you will still find people using magstripe cards that can be cloned with a $5 device off of Amazon. You spend $100 and now you're cloning cars that were considered incredibly secure not even 5 years ago. It is a cat and mouse game. And so there's a lot of technology just involved in what it means to have a credential. And one of the ways technology is countering that is shifting away from credential management to what's called identity management. And this is where you start tying in a biometric, what do you have? What do you know? Who do you are? And you start getting into the layers that Lindsay talked about. Maybe as you're going outside of the perimeter, inside of the building, now you're going to the core area. You might start with a card then you do a card and a pin, then you're doing a card, a pin, and a biometric, and you escalate that. And the identity mechanisms are what tie that all together. Another area we've seen a lot of technology push having to do with the executive threats of late is a lot of mobile and personal duress mechanisms. And that's how do you overlay these into your existing security posture, whether it's a button, an app on a phone, or even something that's like there's now another extra duress button on the desk. What happens when those buttons are pressed? You do a lockdown versus a lockout. There's a lot of subtlety there that you have to get into. It's no longer a security problem, but operationally, you're still compliant with fire codes. How do doors behave and things when this goes on? So technology, again, it's a tool that can be used to shape your procedures, and then you train your people on how to do that. I'm going to keep saying this as much as everyone else. It's how you train to use these things. What happens when someone pushes that duress button? What happens when someone got into your building and now they present a false biometric? The technology can give you the information, but it's not going to tell you what to do next. And so, I'm not taking that because I said there, information, that's what we're beginning surrounded with nowadays. AI is an amplification of information. And the way we're starting to look at security systems now is it's really not access control and video or intrusion. It's information streams. And security is just more of a management of information related to security. So as you're building your platforms, about how do you get the right information in front of the right people? I'll talk about that later, about something about coordination response. That's where I think there's some really exciting changes happening right now. So there's easy technology that you can deploy to help address some of these, getting into a building easy, but you have to deploy it in a way that people know how to use and trained. And again, let's say it came down to someone training to know this doesn't smell right. It's not looking right. They could have pushed a button on their computer and technology would have let them in. But it's that human element that's really important still.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll come back to talk more about that in a second. But as we have this conversation, it's, we've all probably done our versions of tabletop exercises of what happens if, right? So what happens if something happened tomorrow in one of our facilities, would we feel that our teams were prepared? And that's a big part of the conversation that we're having now. So coordination matters a lot. Dan, I'm going to go back to you if I can. You have led crisis response at the highest level in the most dramatic events that we've experienced over the last number of years. What framework would you have that you could advise our audience here on, and what facilities leaders need to do to ensure that there is a unified response across security, operations, IT, HR, external responders? What advice would you give to folks?
Train the way you respond the way you train. Get people in the room, have those tabletop conversations, have some drills, throw some challenges into it, and see how people respond. It's not about having a perfect plan. It's about putting people forward who can plan for the problem that just presented itself, because you'll have a plan. And the reason you're all gathered together because of the crisis is the plan didn't work. So you have to throw that away, assess and define what your new situation is, and figure out, okay, what's the 5 most important things we need to do right here, right now? Secure the facility, health and safety issues, whatever it is. But what's your 5 things? And you can change them. If you come up with 5 things and you make a mistake and you need to change out for another, you can do that. But you need to come up with the 5. There's going to be 5,000 things you need to do with your crisis. What are the 5 most important things you need to do right now? And making sure people culture. One of the questions in the chat talked about, what do you do if people are afraid to admit they made a mistake because they're fearful of leadership? Well, if leadership is making people fearful for making mistakes as opposed to understanding mistakes happen and working together, you're going to have a huge problem as opposed to a small problem. I'm a cybersecurity professional. I advise companies all the time. I got a link. I was on a phone and it looked like it was familiar. I clicked it and I said, oh, that's not good. And I will admit, part of me said, well, how bad could it be? And then I called my IT team and said, hey, I screwed up, right? So they did the remediation strategy. They did it. Who knows why they sent me the thing, but whatever they did, it didn't do anything because we cut it off in time and we were able to, and I wasn't, called before the CEO for clicking on a link. So we have to allow people to make mistakes and support them when they do, and make sure that our program is building upon that and trying to work on the goal of keeping everybody safe. And part of that is the culture that makes me able to make mistakes and not be raked through the coals.
Yeah, that's great advice.
If I can, Daniel, I can just add on to that. So I think a culture where you are regularly frequently, openly talking about workplace safety issues, how these things can come up, would hopefully maybe lower some of that fear and also increase the likelihood that people are doing the right thing because it's openly talked about. I can tell you after this incident happened that I just described, I met with our front of house teams in all of our offices and I told them what went right and what could have gone very differently if they hadn't done the right thing. Like, we have these conversations, we do monthly training conversations on different topics. And this is just something that we talk about, and it's really just woven into the fabric of who we are as an organization. And so I think in the event that something doesn't go quite right as it should, it's still a safe environment to talk about it. And I would also encourage you, if you feel like maybe culturally there is something that needs to be addressed here, I mean, you can make anonymous tip boxes, you can give people a way, that maybe they're not reaching out to their direct supervisor, but you have somebody who is maybe a little bit safer of a landing spot for people to be able to go to express these things. I would definitely encourage you to give open conversation around these topics, and also other touch points that might not be their direct manager to go to.
Yeah,
fantastic. Can I just piggyback off a threat that's there that we don't deal with, right? We all know our employees and our coworkers, and we know when they're having a bad day, right? Or someone showed up late, or, maybe I had a late night and a bad ice cube. If that's a one-day problem, then that's fine, right? We all are human. But if you start to see changes in people and they're going through some financial challenges, they're going through relationship challenges, their physical appearances change, they are getting frustrated, their social media, they're posting things that are concerning. Well, lots of people feel that they don't want to be the one to report on another employee. And I wind up, I'm a talking head on a national news organization oftentimes after a bad day, and somebody will be on the camera saying, "Oh, we all knew that this was happening. This was going on, that was going on." You actually can save somebody's life and save the lives of your coworkers by letting people know, going to HR, that, hey, I think Dan has a problem. And I think Dan needs some help. And there is all kinds of opportunities for companies with peer support units and peer assistance programs to get people to help before they get to a place where they're falling off that cliff, they've lost their job, and they're considering engaging in self-harm and violence against their coworkers. So I'm a son of an alcoholic whose father was a drunk. His coworkers reported him. His boss brought him in, told him he's going to go to a special program. If he completes it and does this thing, he has a job. If not, he's fired. Well, thankfully for me, he turned his life around and went, retired as the vice president of IT technology for New England Telephone, and actually helped hundreds of people and coworkers get help. But if his coworkers hadn't reported that, my father's life was going to go off the rails, and mine and my mother's and my brother's as well. But not being afraid to share actually can help somebody, and not just be the person who's telling on people in the office.
Yeah, just in what both of you said, culture obviously matters a lot, just setting up a safe space, but being aware that these are things that people need to watch out for, and then having the safe environment such that they can talk about it, and then collectively the organizations can get their arms around it. And then you hopefully can watch out for enough stuff that you can't actually predict 100% beforehand, but you are culturally aware and knowledgeable enough and sensitive enough to make sure that you're getting the right actions put in place. So that's really helpful. So a conversation that we had separately at different one of these forums, we talked about preparedness with respect to how the buildings play a big perimeter security role. Lindsay, you said that up front, and how you coordinate with them. And then also when bad things do happen, you have to be coordinated with the local authorities as well, and local law enforcement. And Dan, I know you spent a lot of time in that. What advice would you give the audience for how that coordination might work, or what preparedness you have to do ahead of time to make sure that when things go bad, that you're ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, go ahead, Dan.
No, go ahead, Lindsay. That's yours.
Relationships matter, right? Like if you have that relationship with the person who is the director of security with your building, or whatever a similar title looks like. If you have that relationship with that person, if something is going down at the building that might not impact you, but it's something, outside of the building, around the building, you're top of mind for them. You've got their cell phone number. You're able to text them and say, we just got this notice, what's going on? And they're responding. So I would say that those relationships really, really matter. On the positive side, I think when you know the security team that is in your building on a daily basis, on the positive side, like they know your organization, they're more invested in making sure that your clients or people visiting your space are having a smooth and seamless experience. Like it's more of a customer service. They're an extension of your customer service and your client experience. That's on the positive, daily, everything is good side of things. When it comes to, I'm thinking about our Chicago office. There's a gentleman at the base building there. I travel to our Chicago office probably quarterly, not very often. And I watch him when I'm walking through the lobby, and he keys in on me and says, I don't recognize this woman as somebody who's here every day, yet she's walking towards this turnstile like she belongs here. Does she belong here? I don't know. So he just casually comes over to me. Hi, good morning, ma'am. Nice to see you. Can I help you find the floor that you're looking for? Right. So he is doing it as a gesture of client service. What he's doing is making sure that I've got the right credential to get through that turnstile. And so I think that when you are partnered with your base building, they know your people, they know who should be there, they know what that experience should be like. And so I can't overstate that relationship strongly enough, because they are, as I said in the beginning, they're your first line of defense.
Mm-hmm. Dan, sounded like you wanted to get in.
Yeah, I agree with Lindsay. It's partnerships. It's knowing people ahead of time, right? It's not people talk about exchanging a business card before the bad day. Well, if I go to your top right drawers, you pull them out. You guys have a bunch of business cards. You have no idea who that person is. You haven't called them, but you don't want to throw the card away. It's not about business cards. It's about sitting down, meeting, having conversations, having a cup of coffee. If an event happens, go down and talk to your base building security team and say, hey, you saw that event in LA. What are you guys thinking here? How would that play out here in this location? And then if you have the ability to do so, I can tell you that every tactical team in America wants more training. So even if it's off hours, if they've got the ability to come into your facility, your building, and you'd allow them to come into your office space, obviously supervised, and do some responses should they have to do a scenario and show up on that day, they're going to appreciate it. They're going to know the lay of your land. And the first time they're coming to you in crisis, they're not going in blind. They know where the manufacturing space is. They know where the office, they know where the locations that people are sheltering in place are. So if there's any chance to have law enforcement train, I'm not talking about in the middle of the workday and scaring people and what have you, but giving them access to your facility, to your buildings. As a facility manager, you want to do that. And as a tenant, I'd be all for it, making sure that law enforcement knew exactly how to get up to the 23rd floor of my office at Kroll and help me and my team if we needed them as quickly as possible.
Adding on to the law enforcement aspect of this, and we talked about this a little bit on the last webinar that we did, but it's as simple as, if your building will allow your restroom on the main lobby floor to be used by law enforcement, they're walking the beats, they're patrolling the streets, and they need to pop in for a cup of coffee and use the restroom. And if your building is a friendly place to do that, you've got the benefit of having visible police professionals in your space on a somewhat regular basis, and that could potentially thwart a future threat that may come your way.
Yeah, that was the interesting thing that we surfaced. One of our other clients is the head of security for a building portfolio, and he said you'd be surprised by how many of the property building managers don't let the police people come in to use the bathroom. And unless they're in and invited to come in and are familiar with the environment, when they come in for the first time, if something bad were to happen, you don't want them to now have to go figure it out. And that was a really interesting insight from that last conversation. I'm going to share, please.
Hey, there's a parallel too on the technology side here about the friendship you have at a personal level. You can create these friendships at a systems and IT level, for example. It is quite possible in advance to come up with agreements that there's ways of sharing information inside and outside the building, the information flow I talked about. You can create agreements so that certain cameras might be visible to the local police forces. This is not something you figure out the day of something went wrong. It's something you figure out well in advance. And we could probably do a seminar just on how to get that stuff set up. But definitely as you're involved in maybe iconic Kyle buildings, or maybe you're in a building that's also more the public venue space, getting these kind of agreements in place to share data bidirectionally. So you can, and you're sitting in your office, see your perimeter, your building from the city's perspective. And likewise, if an incident's happening, the city can come in and look inside of your building. These are things you can definitely figure up in advance, test in advance, and what they normally say, train in advance, so you can go, let's war game or tabletop something happening over here, verify all those agreements are in place. This is a technically easy thing to do. It's really a policy IT driven thing, getting everyone to agree to allow it to happen.
Yeah. Well, so that's a great bridge, Rob, to the technology and the landscape and how it's evolving. So we know through Castle ourselves, we see access control, video analytics, mass notification, visitor management, remote monitoring, AI, and we just had this conversation about that on the tech side, but it's changing it by the minute, I think. And so, Rob, what are you seeing from a system standpoint? So you just talked a little bit about how you can build relationships off of technology and enable law enforcement and others to do different kinds of things. What do you see today as opportunities to improve prevention and response? What technology do you like? What do you think is maybe overhyped? How do you see it?
I'll mention AI in a minute because everyone wants to talk about AI, but I would say where technology's really improved dramatically, and I would say subtly and silently though, is how well you can share information and communicate. This could be in between systems, but also using like an LTE mobile radio. I'll give you an example. One of our clients recently was involved in stopping what could have become a mass shooting exercise. I don't want to overly dramatic about it, but again, people trained, they did the right thing. But what I found was interesting about it is the incident happened in Washington State. It was command controlled out of Michigan. But because of how quickly technology works with land mobile radios or LTE radios, they were able to share data across their networks. The people locally on the ground were doing what they needed to do at the same time being coordinated remotely. And this is all happening in real time. And one of these things, again, we could spend an episode. It's like when an incident happens, a little timer sequence starts. You know, how long does it take to detect it? How long does it take to recognize it? How long does it take for someone to start propagating it? There's like 8 steps that have to happen to finally says mitigate. Every time you can just take a second or two off of one of those steps, one of those decisions procedures, you're collapsing what could be a 300-second response down to a 180-second response. And that sounds fast, but 3 minutes is a really long time if there's someone out there potentially with a gun or a weapon. And so there's a lot of communication technologies that have come into play of late that I think people need to look at. Are we using technology to get information moving quickly? And likewise, are people communicating quickly? The second bit is the whole AI thing. There's a lot of AI talk. And the way we try to position it right now is AI is an assistant. It doesn't replace a person. Again, it's an information problem. The AI can bring information up to someone's attention, an operator, and help them make an informed decision, provide context around it. But we're seeing a lot of hype about the AI is the easy button. You smash it and suddenly you have a fully virtual guard. You have like an automatic alarming knock sock and it's making all these decisions for you. That is not the way to go. It doesn't mean it can't be there in the future. But even if it is there, remember, AI has to be audible. It has to be able to validate it's going to do. It's got to behave the same way every time. It's got to become deterministic. And deterministic and AI are not typically things you talk about related. So there are a lot of interesting AI technologies out there that I believe can very well augment the situation and augment your platforms. Like turning platforms into information systems are important because AI is just another layer of information. But you need to be very careful with the AI hype that it's going to replace or reduce. It's going to augment. It's an assistant. Again, we can go really deeply into that if you'd like, but that's my concern right now is that there's a lot of hype about it solving all the problems, whereas it's a very powerful tool, but you don't want to overuse it.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. Just oh my gosh, can you believe what AI can do now? And then we could just give it all to that AI, and it is an augment, not necessarily, or not a replacement, as you said. The other thing that I think you said this earlier, which I really appreciate, the idea that management of information related to technology or related to security is where it's at. Not security per se, but it's the information around that security that actually matters. And you're your story about the command center in Michigan versus what was an incident in, you said Washington, I think. That's very powerful in what's possible these days. So Lindsay, I'll turn to you because I know that a lot of us have conversations with our clients about the ROI in technology and how you present the case to the senior management team because it's cost money. How do you see that in your world?
Yeah, I mean, the ROI on a daily basis, honestly, is how we're managing our space utilization. In the post-COVID world, we are able to flex, hoteling arrangements, flexible workspaces, all of those types of things, because at my fingertips, I have information on every single person in our firm, how often they come into the office on a regular basis, all of those data points that I can say, if you're not coming into the office at least 3 days a week, you're moving to a hoteling arrangement. So that's really for us where we're managing our real estate portfolio, which is a significant line item in our yearly spend. That's where the ROI comes for us on a daily basis. So that's kind of the nice feel good story side of for everybody except those who lose their offices. But that's really kind of the daily basis of how we use that technology. And in the worst case scenario, it's everything that we've all been talking about up until this point. It is the ROI is when you stop that person from being able to get into your office, there is no amount of money that can replace. The threat that I described earlier, I can't imagine the millions of dollars that our firm probably saved in ransom. I don't know if we would have paid it or not. I'm not part of that group, but that was a huge ROI for us in terms of the technology that we had in place and the significant investment that we made in training our people. And so I think the coin goes both ways. It's the daily basis ease of reporting, but then it's the worst case scenario. We're keeping the bad guys out.
Yeah, Dan, I don't know if you have any experience in how you establish ROI with your clients about technology investments or investments broadly in security.
Yeah, it's tough to establish the bullets that weren't fired at the armored vehicle or the assassin that didn't try and take on the EP team, right? But what I can establish is, we do training for lots of clients around the globe, and our training is not just the bad day at the office. We train about walking to and from the train station. You're at the mall, you're at your place of worship. We do a comprehensive training. The ROI for me is afterwards, people saying, "This was really amazing. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to share this feeling that the company invested in their well-being and feeling like the company cares." Like you say, I scramble jets with my team all the time after a bad day, and we try and find out what happened, how it happened, and help our clients prepare for litigation. But when a team comes to us and says, "Well, that was really a great hour and a half of our time, and I want to share this information with my family," that's a return on investment where you're investing in your people, and I don't know how you measure that. They feel that the company actually cares about their personal safety and security, and that's $1 million line item for sure.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to close this off with one big question, and then
one quick comment is,
sorry,
I don't want to be contrary to everything you just said, but I do find it odd that we're focused on what is my ROI on security. What's your ROI on your water bill? What's your ROI on the electricity coming into your building? It's security, in my opinion, when done correctly, it's a cost of doing business. It's not a one-time project. It is a constant, ongoing endeavor. And I think we're seeing it here on the panel. You're always training, you're always talking, it's always engaged. You get this mindset of like, I'm going to do a project, I'm going to do my security, and my security's done. And I really view security as almost evolving into utility in some sense. We don't question the ROI on our power. We might question the ROI on certain kind of investments, but I find the question itself interesting. It's just a comment I make here on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we hear this a lot from our clients about these investments that are required, and then obviously the cost of getting it wrong is infinite, as we just talked about. So how do you connect those two things together? Because on the one hand, I have a CFO, I have to justify investing in whatever we're investing in, and on the other, would you ever want Lindsay's story to happen, Dan's story? Like, these stories cannot happen. how do you prevent them from happening? And of course, it's worth the money, but those ideas don't necessarily come together in an easy way. And I think some of the conversations we've had. So the one big topic, just to close this out, and then I want to make sure if there are questions from the audience that we get to those as well. I think we've already talked about a lot about culture and training. Is there anything else we didn't talk about, in particularly Lindsay and Dan, on training or awareness and sensitivity building work that you guys have done that people should know about? Any other words of wisdom or advice that you would have?
I can start as Dan, and then you can add on if that's okay.
Great.
So Dan and I traveled the U.S. and other members of his team and I traveled Europe, conducting these trainings on site. And I think from my perspective, partnering with an organization such as Kroll was paramount to the success of our program. I think that they have such highly trained professionals who have a lot of legitimacy behind their experience that lends to what they're able to convey in this training. And I think one of the other things I'll say, seeing how much of an international audience we have here, is that the training was very much tailored to the concerns and the risks in the areas in which we were training, right? Like in the US, we trained on a lot of more on the gun violence side. Europe says that's not a European problem. And so we tailored the training more to the local climate, if you will. But I think that was kind of our biggest takeaway was tailoring the training and working with professionals in the industry who are highly regarded, so that when you're sitting in that room or on the Zoom meeting, you've got people's attention because the people in the room know what they're talking about.
Thank you. Dan, any thoughts from you? What we didn't talk about today with respect to culture and training? Dan, can you hear us?
I would just add to that part of the training is also listening to the folks who are getting the training. What keeps them up at night? What are their experiences been? And having them part of the conversation where they're saying, well, what if this happened, or I had this happen? And then tailoring your training to respond to their actual real life experiences is helpful to make sure that you're not just putting on a PowerPoint, you're putting information out that is meaningful to people and responsive to their thoughts, ideas, and concerns.
Great, thank you. Let me check the audience and see if there are questions. I know we would love to have any questions from the group on the comments section, I think. Let me see if there's anything out there.
I see a comment here referencing security and workplace at children's schools. I went to the head of schools for my daughter's school and said, I do security for a living, and I can tell you right now where the vulnerable spots are. Let's talk. And they put additional protocols in place because I was like, no, I'm not okay. My daughter's here every day, 5 days a week. Like, no, we need to talk about this. So I could not agree more in looking at these things. Children's schools, other places where the people that we love are, speak up, have those conversations.
Yeah, if I were just to speak on behalf of Castle and our team here, I think one of the things that we all in Castle find passion around is this is such an important issue. We happen to be in a business that is about these kinds of technologies, these kinds of services, but they're so important to each of us, professionally, certainly, but personally, to make sure we're at the highest level of protection for all the people and all of the groups that we work with and live with, and so thank you for that comment. It's a wonderful one. Other questions here? Let's see. AI is endangered if handled with wrong intentions. Similarly, these phishing malware exerted a serious threat to offices globally. When I was at KSA, our refinery, and so I'm like, that just moved on me, and now I can't seem to find it. Oh, here it is. Which is attacked by several several times. Hence, our external emails and general browsing were under the spotlight then. Thank you for that comment. So AI is a thing that we all, I think, generally continue to monitor because of the capability or the capacity for it to do harm and good is not yet fully appreciated or realized. So that's a very good comment. Thank you for that. from Cassandra. You spoke a little bit about practicing scenarios using tabletop exercises. What are some other styles of exercises that you use to train for various scenarios? Maybe Dan, I can go to you.
Yeah, get people around the table and talk about what we do if, a person came that was a disgruntled employee and they were armed with a weapon, and how do we deal with that? What would we do if a person drove their F-150 truck to the lobby of our building as people are coming out during the lunch hour? So those types of, and having those thoughts about the bad things that can happen, and then how are you dealing with it? How do you respond? How do you mitigate it? How do you secure that location? How do you take care of people? Do you have hemorrhage control in your building that you could actually help people before the first responders get there? Are there things in place you can identify your security team that if there is somebody that's acting inappropriately in the parking lot, that they're doing what Lindsay's security official did? Wait a second, let me just go verify and see what's going on here. Having a polite conversation and seeing if there's something off about something. Human beings are great at telling whether somebody is engaged in pre-operational behavior, right? If I get on a train in Boston and everyone's head is in the phone, and I look around and everyone's on their phone or in their Kindle or their book, I feel safe and secure in that, right? But if there's a guy looking around, all around his environment, that's either a cop like me or former cop, or it's a predator looking to engage in some harm. So having folks look, identify, and report challenges, and then having people work through, okay, so we've got this challenge. What do we do with it? Who do we report it to? How do we notify law enforcement? Where do we stage people? And I want to go back to the coordination that have been talked about, where we're coordinating between the tenant and the location, but also there's other facility managers around you, and they have information, they have processes, they have procedures, and working together and having a weekly call or a monthly call, having an email and text exchange where I've got 25, 30 different facility managers that are talking and sharing information. If someone's over my place and acting suspicious, and they show up 2 blocks away at the other place and 2 blocks away, we could all share that and identify that person before they come. And when the crisis is on, we can be giving information back and forth. The other thing it allows is if I have to dump my building, it's certainly helpful, especially in February, to have another facility that's willing to let our folks go in there and provide a safe and secure environment. So kind of building a regional team in your neighborhood where security professionals are working together is another way of tabletopping and exercising these things.
Great.
And I would just talk to your people to find out what is of concern to them. A lot of us in our positions are far enough removed from the front lines, if you will, that we're probably, sadly, a little bit out of touch with what they're worrying about. And so, like, we had a meeting and our reception team said, if somebody comes in and they're, inflammatory in some way, who do I call and what do I say not to tip this person off of, like, we've got a problem. I've got a really angry person at the front desk. And so we established a code phrase, if you will, to be able to have our reception team call a select number of people that they're able to say something that person knows, I either need to call in enforcement, or I'm in a position to where I can go to that front desk and try to diffuse the situation. And so I think, and that was something that came to light from our reception team. They were the ones who brought it up, right? Like, they're there on a daily basis. So talk to these different teams and find out, like, what are the things what's worrying you, and then develop a plan around that, because we're not in all the places every day to know what those instances could be.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm watching the time, and I think we're going to close this down here. But one last lightning round question to our panelists. We've talked a lot, covered a lot of surface area today, but if there is one investment in time, in money, process, relationships, what have you, that you would give as advice to the audience, what would it be? And maybe I'll start with you, Rob. You can do that, and then we'll go around the horn and finish it up.
A singular investment that you can make.
Well, singular one. What would you advise?
You have to look at the whole thing holistically, and typically that does involve bringing in an external eye, whether it's someone like myself or someone like Dan. It's fresh eyes always see things differently. Doesn't mean they're finding something you didn't know, but fresh eyes always help. So I would say it's a good investment is to get that second look.
Great. Dan?
I would say, do an assessment, develop a security program and culture that is excellent, and then constantly work to improve it.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Yeah, I would kind of reiterate where I started. It's the multi-pronged approach, right? It's the relationships, it's the training, and it's the investment in technology. And I wish I could say one of those is more important than the others, but honestly, if they're not all working in tandem, I think that they all border on, potentially at some point becoming worthless. And your whole investment goes out the window at that point.
Wonderful. So unfortunately, Steve couldn't join us because of the technical complications, but it was great to have this conversation with you guys, Lindsay, Dan, Rob. Really appreciate your insight and your experience. We certainly realize that facility management and leadership today isn't just about making things work. It's so much about making sure that we're resilient, we are prepared, that we are stewards of our people and our places and all of that in our ecosystem. There's so much evolution, so much change that has happened over the last couple of years. So this conversation hopefully has been helpful to all of the folks who are out there. So thank you to all of you guys again. Thank you to the folks who joined in from our webinar today. Thank you for all the work that you do, and please stay safe, and thank you for joining us again. All the best.